Today, we're going to dig into an economic idea that, whether you know it or not, plays a role in almost everything you buy. It's called asymmetric information, and we're going to ask a pretty provocative question. Is it a bug in our economic system, or is it actually the feature that makes our whole world work?
You know that feeling, right? You're standing on a used car lot, or you're about to click buy on some gadget, and this little voice in your head goes, "What does the seller know that I don't? Is this thing a gem, or is it a total lemon just waiting to fall apart?"
Well, that feeling? It's got a name. Economists call it asymmetric information. It's just a fancy way of saying one person in a deal knows a lot more than the other person. And it's at the heart of that fear that you're about to get taken for a ride. You see, for decades, this whole idea has been taught as a classic market failure, a glitch in the system that needs a fix. But the source for today's explainer poses a really wild question. What if we've been looking at this completely backwards this whole time?
Okay, so first let's unpack the way most people think about this. It all starts with a famous concept known as the lemons problem.
So here's the official definition. Think about it. The person selling a used car knows every little thing about it. The weird rattle it makes, the time it was in an accident, all of it. But you, the buyer, you just see a shiny coat of paint. That gap in what you both know, that's asymmetric information.
Now, this theory, which actually won a Nobel Prize, says that because buyers can't tell the good cars, the peaches, from the bad ones, the lemons, they're not willing to pay top dollar, so they offer a kind of average price. But that's not enough for people selling the really good cars, so they just leave the market. And what you're left with is a market full of, well, lemons, a total market failure.
But now, let's take that whole idea and flip it completely on its head. The source we're looking at today argues this isn't a bug at all. It's a fundamental feature of a working economy.
And this is where the big shift in thinking happens. On one hand, you have the old view. Asymmetric information means failure, lemons, and mistrust. But on the other hand, our source rebrands it as the division of knowledge, the very engine of specialization, cooperation, and basically civilization itself. And this idea actually has really deep roots. The economist Ludwig von Mises put it perfectly. He said our ability to specialize, for different people to know different things and then work together, is exactly what separates us from the animals.
I mean, think about it. Who knows more about building a house, the builder or the person buying it? Of course, it's the builder. And honestly, that's exactly how you want it. You don't need to be an expert in pouring concrete. You just need to hire someone who is. It's the same for the farmer growing your food or the engineer who designed your phone. So, here's the big point. What some economists call a problem, asymmetric information, is really just another name for specialization. It's not a flaw to be fixed. It's the very reason we have a complex modern economy to begin with.
Okay, I can hear you thinking, that's a nice idea, but what about the actual lemons? How do we not get ripped off every single day if we all have these knowledge gaps? Well, let's look at how markets actually build the trust we need.
Yeah, this is the real-world question, isn't it? If specialization is the name of the game, how does society function without just constant fraud? Well, our source says that the market itself has evolved some really powerful tools to solve this exact problem. So the market has this whole toolkit for building trust. Think about it. Companies spend millions, sometimes billions, on their brand reputation because it's valuable. They offer warranties and guarantees to take the risk off of you, and then you've got these huge forces like good old-fashioned competition and public reviews that punish the bad guys and reward the good ones. And the source gives us a perfect real-world example: CarMax. They didn't need a government program to solve the lemons problem. They built a multi-billion-dollar company by solving it themselves. Their return policy basically makes the buyer's knowledge gap irrelevant. Who cares what the seller knows when you have a whole week to drive the car and find out for yourself? All right, so we've seen how markets have these built-in ways to solve for information gaps. But now the argument takes a really sharp turn. The source says there's another place where this information problem is absolutely massive, and those solutions, they barely exist.
Right, so markets adapt. But what happens when the seller isn't a company, but the government? And the buyer is you, the citizen. The source argues that this is the real asymmetric information problem we should be worried about. And the key concept to understand here is something called rational ignorance. Now, that might sound a little insulting, but it's not. It's actually the very logical, very human decision that most of us make to not become experts on the insanely complex world of government and politics. And here's why it's a totally rational choice. First, the government is just enormous. It's too big and complicated for any normal person to truly understand. Second, your single vote has an almost 0% chance of actually changing an election.
And third, the amount of time and energy you'd have to spend to become truly informed is huge, while the direct payoff for you is tiny.
And what's the result of this huge information gap between the people in power and the people they represent? Well, how about a re-election rate for incumbents that's consistently over 90%? That points to a system with a major lack of accountability, where the feedback from the buyers, the voters, is incredibly weak.
So let's put these two worlds right next to each other and just compare how they really stack up when it comes to these information gaps.
This is really where the rubber meets the road. If a business lies to you or gives you a bad product, you can fire them immediately by just walking away and giving your money to their competitor. The feedback is instant. But if a politician does something you don't like, you might have to wait 2, 4, even 6 years for a chance to cast one single vote against them.
So at the end of the day, we're left with two completely different ways of looking at this. You've got the standard textbook view that says asymmetric information is a market failure that the government needs to come in and fix. And then you have the source view, which says it's actually a market feature that makes society work, but it's a fundamental bug that leads to government failure.
And that brings us to one last, really important question to think about. The risk of buying a lemon car is real, sure, but the market has found all these creative ways to deal with it. The source asks us to think about the much, much bigger risk of being a rationally ignorant citizen dealing with a massive, powerful state. It leaves us with this final thought. Where does a lack of information pose the greater danger? To your wallet or to your liberty?